Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I really appreciate you. And as always, I have a fantastic guest with me today. Her name is Amanda Kate. She is a kinesiologist, archetypal transformation, and intuitive life coach, author, partner, mother, and dog mom. She is also, and I do love this, let's write this down. She is a recovering people pleaser and self-flagellator. How many of us can really relate to that? Who is now dedicated to always growing, developing, and learning new ways of being. Amanda is the author of the book titled Divine, Messy, Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truths over external influences. Again, I think we can all relate to that. She has a powerful story of healing and self-awareness, which launched her on an incredible journey and a new life. She now is on a mission to help others do the same. Amanda, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the
Oh,
show.
thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be on.
And just for grins, go ahead and share with us where you are right now and what time it is and what day it is.
Yes. Yeah, so I am in Melbourne, Australia, and it's Wednesday the 17th. So I'm a day after, and it's 6 a.m. So
Mm, wow.
nice
Well,
and
thank
early.
you. Yeah, nice and early. So thank you so much for being here. It is 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday here in the Mile High city of Denver, Colorado. So Amanda, thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it. You have a very amazing story. It is, whew, it's, I can't even, when I read the profile, I had to read it a couple of times because I was going, oh my gosh, this is just almost unbelievable. So tell us how you became this life coach, doing all the things that you're doing, what your own personal transformation was like in your own personal journey, because it was definitely a challenge.
Oh, yes. Look, and whose life isn't really, let's face it.
Mhm.
Nobody gets where they are without a few bumps in the road. And look, I think my childhood was pretty good. I grew up in Perth. We then moved to Adelaide. I then moved over to the UK to do 11 years. Well, it wasn't planned to be 11 years. I was only going over for my working holiday visa, which was 2 years.
Oh,
Um, Ended up meeting an Englishman and getting married and stayed there. I always joked that I left Australia with, a backpack another little bag, and I came back with a 40-foot container, a husband, and two kids.
oh, jeez.
so so yeah, it was quite a long time over there, and now this year will be 11 years in Melbourne. So I
Wow.
sort of still feel like a bit of a gypsy, moving all over the place and no fixed
Wow.
address. Melbourne's not quite home. But yeah, so I found kinesiology and life coaching just after I'd been a really self-motivated person, and it got to a point where I was needing 3-hour naps in the afternoon. I was absolutely
Wow.
exhausted. I could barely get through the day, and I was trying to work out what was going on. I was still working out. I was still
Mhm.
doing the mum thing. I had pretty much everything that I thought normal people had. I was married, I had two beautiful children, and yet I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And the doctors were doing all these tests, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, there's actually nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, there is something wrong with me.
Mhm.
I was suffering for 13 days a month with my menstrual cycle, and
Oh,
all of this kind of thing. I'd have 6 days when I was ovulating and 7 days when I was actually bleeding, and all of those sorts of things, as well as the exhaustion. My ex-husband's like, why are you exhausted? Everyone else is just tired. It's always worse for you. And I'm kind of going, well, I actually can't cope. Like, I'm really struggling. And I didn't have, we were away from all family at this
mhm.
point. So I was still creating new friendships. I didn't really have anybody to lean on. I was supporting my daughter, who had been going to school in the UK, but when we came back to Australia, she was too young to go to school, and she's ridiculously bright. And so she was just like nightmare child for a little while because
Oh.
she's so intelligent. She needed
Mhm.
that stimulation, and so she'd fight me because that got her the
Mhm.
stimulation she wanted. My son was
Mhm.
being physically harmed at school. I think he was harmed 13 times in 26 weeks, but apparently according to the school it wasn't bullying because it wasn't just the one child, and I'm like, there is a problem here.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
He'd been kicked in the chest. He
Oh.
came home with a massive egg in the middle of his forehead. Like it was really heartbreaking. And so I'd come, to Australia with this beautiful, happy, child. And he got to this point, he didn't want to go to school, stomach aches. And then I was obviously also, helping my now ex-husband
Mhm.
cope with moving across the other world from his family and a job that he didn't
Oh.
really like. And so there was a lot going on, and it was challenging for all of us. But I was holding it all up, and there was
Mhm.
nobody who had my back, and that was the challenge. Um, and it kind of, the first few months here were great. It was probably the best time of our marriage, really.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
whole lot had been very tumultuous. And it just started getting worse after that initial sort of exciting period of, finding a house and getting the kids settled in. And,
Mhm.
the novelty had worn off. And we kind of fell back into the same old habits. And
Mhm.
it was just snarky, snippy, toxic, arguing over everything, and it was challenging.
Mhm.
To the outside, it looked great, but on
Mhm.
the inside, it was not. I could never do anything right. It was, I did too much of this or not enough of that, or I was, completely one way or completely the other. It was
Mhm.
either, I don't understand why you're staying home with the children, it's such a waste of your talent, or God, what is wrong with you? You're so stupid, you
Oh,
can't,
jeez.
and it was just this constant. And that's just, I think it was just his own um, his own pain at being away from his
Mhm.
family externalizing onto me, which again, there's no judgment on that. It just
Mhm.
is. We don't
Mhm.
all have the tools. I didn't have the tools to cope either,
Mhm.
and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually, we'd been on a family holiday, and things were very toxic. It was quite nasty. And I got back from that holiday and I just felt like an empty shell of a human being. I felt like I had nothing to offer.
Mhm.
I wasn't quite at the point of wanting to end it, but I certainly didn't think I had any value in the world. And so I went to my doctor. I got a mental health care plan. I rang a psychology office because I knew that this woman worked in a mindfulness way.
Mhm.
She did assertiveness training and all this sort of stuff. So I actually booked in to see her, and I rang, and the receptionist sort of said, what's going on? I explained the brief stuff about the move, didn't
Mhm.
say anything about the rest of it. And she said, oh, I can't get you in, for 4 to 6 weeks with the psychologist, and her next course isn't starting for another 8 weeks. So we can book you in for both of them. But she said, it sounds like you're under a bit of stress. Who's got your back? And that was it. I was just in pieces. I was just in pieces. And she said, look, we've got a kinesiologist or a Reiki person on site. Would you like, a session with one of
Mhm.
them? They might be able to help. And I'd had one Reiki session before, and it was just a weird energy. And I was like, oh, I don't know that I want to go down that route. I had no idea what kinesiology was. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm willing to try anything. Something
Mhm.
has to shift and get
Mhm.
better. And so I had my first session, and it was life changing. She said, you don't understand how emotionally abused you are, do you? And
Oh.
I went, that makes sense in some other close relationships of mine. It really did. And it took me 4 months to actually put two and two together and figure out what she was actually talking about. I swear she must have been bashing her head against a wall.
Okay,
And
but I have to say, in your defense, or maybe coming from someone who's incredibly stubborn and hard-headed myself in a lot of ways, I actually think 4 months really isn't all that long.
it took me another four to leave.
For just
It
four
was,
months?
yeah, so it was 4 months to work out. My biggest one was actually in my bed, and then another 4 months to actually leave. Um,
I have to say that. I don't think it's that
yeah.
long. I think that you're
Oh, it
actually,
felt like an age. It felt like
well, yeah,
forever, I
of
tell you,
course.
when
Of
you're living it
course.
and it's
Yeah.
toxic and all the rest of it. It did feel like a lot. But things had been bad for a long time anyway.
Hmm.
So it wasn't like it was that much of a surprise.
And how
Um,
long had you been married?
we were married. Oh, God, I nearly forget now. I think 13 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so and yeah, of course there were good times in there, and also there was a lot of the nitpicking, the fighting, the
Hmm.
all of the things,
Yeah.
and a lot of it was because I was either out there shining and I was shining at the wrong people, or I was it was always I
Hmm.
was doing something wrong,
Hmm.
and that's fine. There were certain limits of behavior, and if I crossed out of them, then I got told, and that it just was. But yeah, so it was interesting, and in that time, I think I started my first kinesiology session. I still remember it was the 24th of April 2015, and by the 24th of October was my welcome day at the school. So it was exactly 6 months to the day that I was sitting in the classroom starting to study, because I was like, if I can help anyone the way this has helped me, it will be phenomenal. Um,
I have two questions
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
Even prior to your marriage and things not going well, obviously, were you a people pleaser and a self-flagellator before your marriage? Was this
Oh,
kind of your
yes.
MO? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
that was I guess it's growing up in the church. There's a lot of that guilt, shame, blame
Hmm.
type stuff.
Hmm.
There were very limited I guess, parameters of behavior.
Hmm.
It didn't take a lot to be in trouble, I guess.
Hmm.
And I was always very sensitive.
Hmm.
And that was the big thing. You need thicker skin, you're too sensitive, blah, blah, blah. But
You know,
everyone says you're too sensitive, but they don't say, I'm sorry, I was an asshole.
yeah,
Apologies.
there you go. Exactly.
Like, I'm not
I
being
find this
sensitive.
I find this fascinating though, because you're talking about, growing up in the church and everything. And of course,
Mm,
I mean, I understand,
yeah.
and I'm sure a lot of our listeners do, but how ironic that as you're
Mm,
growing up in the church, which is promoting forgiveness
mm,
and love,
yeah.
but not to the person who really matters the most, not to love yourself. And, there was
Yeah.
so much self-sacrifice that was looked upon as being, virtuous.
Yeah.
And along the way, part of us was dying a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And also you look at I listen to the conversations, and it's still very, homophobic, racist, all of those sorts of
Hmm.
things. And I kind of go, Jesus was a teacher of love.
Hmm.
He was the one who sat down with the prostitutes and the lepers and the sick and the dying and the people that nobody
Hmm.
wanted to be near or touch. And he gave love and compassion.
Hmm.
And yet, and I think, I mean, I wrote that in my book, that people would walk into church and pretend to be this holier than thou people, and they'd walk out and be the same bastard they were before they walked in.
Hmm.
And yet for that hour they'd be this god loving perfect person. And that was the bit that kind of rankled for me, even from a very young age. I'd go,
Hmm.
but they're saying one thing and doing another, and that never sat well with me.
I just want
And
to,
that's a big thing.
if I can tell
Yeah,
just a little story,
of course,
because
please.
my fourth or no, my first grade teacher, I absolutely could not stand this woman. I mean,
Mm.
she was a horrible, horrible person. And I mean, I would cry every Sunday night, and I would get sick, physically
Oh,
sick, because I had to go
wow.
to school the next day and face this woman. And everybody kind of felt the same way, all my classmates, but of
Mm.
course, you have to be a good kid
Oh,
and behave, and oh
yes.
yeah, yeah, never complain. But there was always somebody crying in class, always,
Oh,
constantly. She
yeah.
went to my church.
Yeah.
So I was one of the lucky ones. I had to actually see her in church on Sunday, and I would cry, and my mother would say, but Cheryl, she's such a nice person. She's always so holy and pious. And I at that age, 6 years old or 5 years old, whatever, I knew. And I said, she's faking it. It's just not real. I
Yeah.
said, she's really a horrible person. And
Yeah.
I did find out later, I got my validation that, yeah, she was a horrible person. But
Mm.
yeah.
And often that horrible, and I think this is the biggest understanding I've got, is that people who treat each other poorly, and I was the same, I wasn't a great person. I look back at who I was reactive, I was defensive, because I constantly felt like I was being attacked. And what do you
Mm,
do when you feel like you're being attacked? You either attack first or you defend yourself,
hmm
and so I was constantly in this reactive sort of defensive play out.
hmm
I was very passive aggressive because I didn't know there was any other way to communicate, really,
hmm
because we couldn't say what we wanted. We
hmm
couldn't just speak our mind,
hmm
and therefore it was constantly self-editing, but trying to get across what you mean, and therefore there was a lot of that passive aggressiveness going on in
hmm
there because
hmm
you couldn't just straight talk, and it's quite fascinating when you look at that conditioning.
hmm
And so I know that that was a way that I kept myself safe.
hmm
If I attack you first, you can't attack me. If I
hmm
get in first with the defense, I'm prepared for your attack.
hmm
And it was just a way that my body was keeping me safe, because the whole idea of the body, obviously, is that we can grow up to adulthood.
hmm
And so all of these people who have all these pain behaviors, who have all of these shitty ways of being,
hmm
have them because at some point they worked, at some point they kept us safe.
Right.
And so we keep going back to them, even though they're outdated and there's potentially better ways for us to do, or there are better ways for us to do these things.
hmm
And so that's I guess where I end up with the compassion for those sorts of people, is
hmm
because we know that came from a trauma base.
hmm But when you're in that, that defense or,
Oh,
attack first or whatever, you're living in your sympathetic nervous system.
oh
You're in
yeah.
fight or flight the entire
Mm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
So your body is reacting to that
Yeah.
constantly, and your nervous
Yeah.
system really never has a chance to settle down. So
Yeah,
is
exactly.
that what kinesiology offered for you? And
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, like, if you can kind of describe, go
Yeah.
back to that very first session
Yeah.
and what it was like, what impacted you the most, and what you could feel internally happening to you as you were going through
Yeah.
that session.
I think, and a lot of people, when they come to me for their first session, it's quite funny because it is such a different modality. We're
hmm
actually testing muscle tone.
hmm
So we do different muscle tests. And if the muscle test holds strong, it shows that the electrical current basically is running through
hmm
the muscle properly.
hmm
If the electrical current is disturbed because of stress, the muscle won't hold tone, because it's like a flickering light. It's like, oh, I don't know what
hmm
this is. And so, first of all, it was the conversation, and I swear she was just like, cha-ching, I've got a good one here.
I got my retirement fund right here.
I know. But we had a bit of a chat and then hopped up on the table, and it was just bizarre. She did all this hand wavy stuff, but even as she was doing the hand wavy stuff over my body, and basically what you do is you get the energy back in the room of the person, because oftentimes our energy is fragmented and we
hmm
want to make sure the whole person is here. And so she was doing all this weird hand wavy stuff, but everything that she was doing, I could actually feel in my body, because I am quite sensitive to the energetics.
hmm
So everything she was doing, I'm like, whoa, like this is weird, but there's something physically happening to me. And then, I could feel every time she asked a question, the change in muscle tone. And I
hmm
think that's what I like about it. I can do kinesiology without, or a form of,
hmm
without the muscle testing. But you know what? The muscle testing is so useful for the client to see the stress,
hmm
to actually be able to go, oh my God, I can't hold that muscle. And then we do this correction and now I can hold it in place
hmm
without any effort. And that is so mind blowing for people to actually understand. And, if you think about the electrical system, the wiring of our body, it pretty much is the nervous system. And the way I describe it to people is, people in their stress state, they tend to go one of two ways.
Mm-hmm.
I flip between the two because I like to, defy convention. But most people will get stuck, like every light, every electrical appliance in their house is on, and they will do. If I do enough, I can do my way out of this. So they are the people who will bake, will, clean, will garden, will whatever. They will just keep doing to try and do the stress away.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the people who literally flop on the couch and can do nothing, and every electrical switch is off. There's nothing coming through the circuits. And so most people go into one or the other stress state. And so and it's quite interesting, in a partnership, you often have like one of each. You'll have one who's a real doer when they're stressed, and then they're like, but why are you sitting down and being so lazy? And the other one's like going, I can't do this, and you buzzing around is stressing me out even more, so I'm going to shut down even more, and I can't cope.
So lucky you have both.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's lucky, but I will go through stages
That was sarcasm.
where
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I will go into the real do.
Uh-huh.
And keep going. And then I hit a wall, and it's like, ugh. And even now I can feel the chronic fatigue type symptoms when I get into the do nothing stage. I can feel like the heavy legs, the breathing that feels really tight across my chest. The heaviness is probably the biggest symptom, but I can start to feel that. And then I get into a bit of insomnia.
Okay.
Because I'm in that wired and tired state where I'm, I can't sleep because I'm too wired, but my body is exhausted. So I can sort of feel those symptoms. And that's my tell sign now. It's just I catch it much earlier now because I've done so much work. But kinesiology I look at as rewiring that nervous system. It's making sure that all of the energy systems are flowing. So we use a mix of Eastern wisdom. So we use the meridian system, we use the chakra system, and we use the auric fields. And we also look at the Western science of it. So there are different points that we can rub that do different things, and there are different areas of the body that will light up other areas of the body, or using some of the spinal nerves to again rebalance the organs that and the nervous system parts that come off of that. So it's a really beautiful blend. And I'd been looking for what I wanted to do for a while. I was looking at nutrition, naturopathy, dietitian, because I knew how much of a picture food played. But when I found kinesiology, we do a bit of nutrition, we do a bit of naturopathy, we do a bit of, we learn about some herbs, we learn about some reflexology stuff. So we've got, we do energy work, so almost like a Reiki type, so there's all of these things that get packed into this one modality. It also touches on, we bring in with the type of kinesiology I did, we've got some touch for health stuff in there, we've got Psych K in there, we've got all of these different techniques that we bring in. And so it covers so much. And that's what I loved about it.
So how long did it take to become a kinesiologist? And I'm sure it might be different where you're at in Australia, I mean, I'm sure country to country, everything is a little bit different, but what was it like for you?
I did PKP, which is actually internationally recognized. And it's a 2-year diploma. But then I also did, it's actually the equivalent 2.5 years of full-time study because there's so many home study units, but you do the actual class time within about 2 years. And then I also did my advanced diploma of kinesiology, which is the international something or other. Basically, it's kinesiopractic. I don't know exactly what it's called. Has a big, long, fancy title. But I did that as well, which is basically the equivalent of about 4,500 hours of study. Which does advanced spiritual, physical, and mental and emotional stuff as well. So it sort of takes everything that you do in the diploma and it goes really, really deep. And it was one of those where every session I'm like, oh my God, like we get to do this. This is amazing. And I just wanted to do more. And then the college also offered quantum neurology, which is anxiety and depression protocols. We did advanced hormones and glands, so looking at the way the biochemistry in the body works and the precursors for your hormones, so we can balance it closer to the source.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about kinesiology, is that we're looking at the root cause of the issue, not the symptoms that you're presenting with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what changed for me, because
Mm-hmm.
people started asking about the relationships. They started asking about more than just the physical symptoms that I was
Mm-hmm.
experiencing. They actually needed to know that so that
Mm-hmm.
they could start rewiring,
Mm-hmm.
and building some boundaries and building some resilience in that
Mm-hmm.
system, building a tolerance level.
Isn't the human body fascinating?
It's
And once you
amazing. And we probably know about this much
I
of it,
know. And we
which
probably
is,
use even less of that, but it's
oh, yeah,
amazing that,
it is.
and the capacity that we have to heal, the body's
Yeah.
natural ability to heal itself, as long as we give it the right environment for which,
Yeah.
it can heal and for that to take place, rather than covering things up with all these pills and
Oh,
treatments and
yeah.
things that
Yeah.
don't work. They just kind of complicate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beautiful part that I love, it blows my mind, is that quantum physicists have proven that the universe is about 4% physical matter. So
Right.
when we're looking at this human meat suit, it's 4% of the picture. So then you go, and this is what I loved about kinesiology, is kinesiology looks at the whole 100% of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just looking at the physical, it's looking at the mental, the emotional, the spiritual. It's
Mm-hmm.
looking at the financial, the relational, the transformational, the metaphysical.
Jeez.
Like, we look at all the different
Mm-hmm.
aspects that tie into you to make you you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're having stress in one area of our life, it's not like it's just in that little bit, it feeds
Right.
into all the others. And that's why we call it a kinesiology balance, because we want to look at getting the whole person in balance,
Mm-hmm.
not just that one aspect.
Mm-hmm. It cracks me up the way you said that. What would you call it? The human meat suit?
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
meat suit.
I never heard that. Never heard it put that way. I wanted to ask you, so now when did you,
Mm,
as far as like timing wise, when did you
yep.
either complete your kinesiology, like the first one? Mostly how then when COVID hit, how did
Yeah.
that impact your practice and
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
did? Because that was just like a huge, pretty much, energetic stink bomb that was,
Oh,
pretty much
yeah.
felt and heard around the world.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Look, I started studying in 2015 and I finished studying
Mhm.
in 2019. So I actually
Mm-mm.
overlapped. I started my international diploma before I'd finished my diploma by, I think, I had about 6 month overlap.
Mhm.
And you're not really supposed to do that, but
Mhm.
I loved what I did and I was good at it. And they
Mhm.
went, you know what, we know you can handle this, so jump in. We want you to
Mhm.
do it. And that's why I did all of the extras that were offered. I did all the advanced techniques and all the extras,
Mhm.
because I did. The more I knew, the more I knew I didn't know, and the more I
Mhm.
wanted to know.
Mhm.
So anyway, I think I handed in all my work at the end of 2019. Um, and so I reckon I got my diploma, or by the time I got my advanced diploma, it was around the April of 2020. So yeah, it got all through in there. So of course I just put, my prices up in the January because I'd had my award done. And then of course
Yeah,
that was not a
smack
good
down.
timing.
Yeah, right.
Because we had to close our business. And especially in Melbourne, I think, God, I can't even tell you how many weeks we had locked down here. We were one of the harshest lockdowns in the world. We couldn't go 5K from our house. And I can't wear a mask because of my past trauma.
Right.
It puts me into a panic attack,
Yeah.
and I go into either a panic attack or I want to hit people. So it's
Mhm.
safer for everybody if I don't wear a mask.
Mhm.
Let's
Well, I
just
don't
put it
know.
that way.
As a ninja, I really think there is a lot of benefit hitting people. Nothing makes me feel better than going to the dojo and smacking some people around and,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, problem solved. But yeah, I'm one of those people. I can't wear a mask either. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and as a former respiratory therapist, that was my first
Oh,
career.
yes. Yeah. I think I heard you say that on another
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Makes
I'm
sense.
really addicted to this thing called oxygen. And I
Yeah.
understand what happens when you're rebreathing your own exhale. I don't even get me started. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
No,
I
I,
really
I
empathize. And,
get it.
and then of course, we were viewed as being evil people,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we
And that's,
didn't. Yeah.
I actually, in a couple of points, a few people came up and attacked me for not wearing a mask. And I was
Oh,
point blank blunt. I said, this is why I'm not wearing one. if you would like to think of your wife, your daughter, your mother going through what I went through, then go for it. And you talk to that next person without a mask. I said, but I have a legitimate reason. And if you want to re-traumatize me, great. Now, that was probably not in my highest, but clearly we all had lessons there. But, you know, one of the guys just basically ran away. He was like, oh, okay, you know, because I was raped.
Yeah.
And I don't say that often, but look, it's a trauma that's passed now. It's fine, but I do not need that pressure on my face.
No.
And so as a result, it's like, you know, I was demonized in certain parts, and and at first I actually wore a sign around my neck, not wearing mask because of medical exemption, because I felt like I was going to be attacked, and it was the attacking that was traumatizing me. Right. So I actually used to wear a sign around my neck. I felt like it was a Jewish gold star for a while there. Wow. And somebody said to me, everybody who's, you know, gotten medical exemption should wear one of those. And I said, the Jews had to wear gold stars in Germany too. And that's not to be disrespectful, but it was the way that I felt so like an outcast. Yeah. It was really quite traumatizing and re-traumatizing. So I actually didn't go out for a lot. Eventually I was like, look, I've just got to own this. And I got rid of the sign and I did my work. You know, I healed those parts of me. And it was only once or twice that I actually told people, you know, what had happened. Obviously, clearly now I've told a few more. But
oh no, we won't tell anybody. No.
That's all right. It's just between you and me.
It's just between the two of us, but we won't tell anybody. It's our little secret.
It's one of those things that, you know, you don't want to go, you know, shouting from the rooftops. Right, and also you don't want people coming up and basically
attacking you,
telling you're a social pariah for not doing it. So it was really challenging. And of course, you know, the first lockdown, everyone went into panic. And so all of my clients disappeared, and they thought it'll only be 6 weeks anyway, so it was fine. So everybody cancelled. And then of course, when we reopened, there were a few that booked in, but I probably lost 80% of my client base just because they were still in trauma and shock and all the rest of it.
Right.
So then we go through the next lockdown, and that next lockdown was almost 6 months. We were completely locked down. So a few people went online, but most people didn't. Like they were in shock. And so as much as I was trying to keep up my stuff, it was lucky we had government assistance. I will always be grateful for that. But it was, pardon me, it was really challenging because the business went from being a sustainable business to being a really expensive hobby.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Right. No, I get it.
And even, so then we had a really big lockdown. Basically July to November, we were locked down. And so of course we were opening up and everyone's like, exciting, we're getting out and about. But of course they're not doing the self-care because they're still in trauma. So they're then out and about doing their shopping and doing their Christmas. And I had a few people come back, but then we were locked down again, I think February. So just as things started to pick up, it went down again. And then we went into another decent chunk of lockdown. So again, I just started to build up and it's gone again. And then we had another one. And then end of last year, we were locked down for another 3 or 4 months, whatever it was.
My God.
We got out of then, and then I started writing my book. And so my energy went towards my book. And so again, whilst I had enough clients to kind of keep me afloat, a lot of the energy was going to the books. So I wasn't putting, I guess, energetically, there was a bit of a block there because the universe knew what I was doing. And so it was creating the space for me. And then it's only really been the last couple of months that things have started picking up because people will not come for help for trauma until they're out of the trauma. And so a lot of people have spent the last, you know, sort of 6 or 7 months pretending that life is normal and that they're back to normal and that everything's great. And it's just now that people are going, things aren't great. I'm actually still really struggling with this. This has been really hard. And now they're seeking out the help. And you know, I do work online and I love working online. It's really opened things up for me. I've got clients in Vietnam. I've got clients in New Zealand. I've got clients in different states within Australia as well. So it is beautiful that it has opened that possibility, which is amazing. And also the coaching stuff works really, really well online as well. But I do kinesiology a bit differently online. So obviously it is about physical touch, but because I've also done some work on in the psychic and mediumship abilities that I've got, I do it like I'm throwing an energetic blanket over you. And even when we're talking now, it's like you're tuned into my radio station, I'm tuned into yours. So energetically, even though we're online, we are connected. And that's how I read people's energy online as well, is just imagining this big blanket over the top of them. And then when we're finished, I lift the blanket off so that, you know, I'm not fully taking on your energy to read it. So yeah, so it does work well, but again, there were those challenges. So yeah, COVID was really, really hard. And there was a lot of discontent. A lot of business owners here still have not recovered. They've lost their livelihood. They've lost all of their savings. One of my clients at the moment has had to close her business and, you know, probably ending up with $250,000 debt because she was closed down by the government.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of that here as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our favorite restaurant, which is just right around the corner from us. And we would always go there to celebrate, you know, our birthdays, anniversary. And it was a great place to go for New Year's Eve because it was so close. And, you know, so we'd go out for New Year's Eve dinner and scurry back home. So we'd miss the traffic and all that stuff. And I remember we were driving by the restaurant when it was in the lockdown, but we had gone to get some groceries, and the restaurant was in this strip mall where there was, and we saw the owner trying to post something outside. It was a windy day and she's struggling with this big sign. And I told my husband, I says, let's drive by and say hello to her, see how she's doing. And so we pulled up, and of course we're very recognizable. My husband's really tall with white hair, and, you know, I kind of stand out, the two of us. And I rolled out the window. I said, you know, Karen, how are things going? And she started to cry.
Oh, yeah, it's devastating.
And she looked at me and she says, we are not known for a takeout or as a takeout restaurant. And so the sign she was posting was just, you know, that we're doing takeout, you know, 3 days a week during this time frame. But it's like nobody's driving by to even see the sign.
No,
because it was out of the way. But yeah, they did close, and she had been with that restaurant 40 years, I think, almost 40 years. Wow. She started out as a 17-year-old hostess, and then a waitress, and then an owner.
Yeah, it's so devastating. It really is. Yeah, it is. And but you know, it is recovering now, and that's the main thing is, you know. And it's been beautiful, you know, seeing some of the transformations of people that are coming in. And, you know, there were people who've gone through obviously massive grief over the last couple of years. And our society doesn't deal well with grief. And so you know, I know people who have been, you know, doctors are trying to push the antidepressants or things like that on them. And it's like, we actually need to deal with your grief. That's the problem. And without that compassionate ear and that, I guess, the energetic tying up of loose ends, it's a really tough one to move through. And a lot of people have felt like they're doing it on their own. I actually know this woman who she's having all sorts of, you know, health issues at the moment. And it's literally, we're clearing her grief and everything. She's lowered her blood pressure medication. She has lowered her cholesterol medication. She has lowered all of them because the stress is going. And it's because she wasn't coping without her partner.
Well, and so, that, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that with the stress, because what stress does to our body, I mean, everybody knows, you know, stress kills, stress is harmful, blah, blah, but it really makes chemical changes in our body. And absolutely. The hormonal changes and the imbalances and things that come from the stress. So it's not just like, oh, calm down, you know, do some deep breathing, you know, have a glass of wine, a hot bath. It goes so much deeper than that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It affects every system in the body. And, you know, and we always say there's 3 types of stress. There's chemical, emotional, and electrical stress. And what we do as kinesiologists is balance out that stress, the physical stress. But yeah, so
let me ask you then with the coaching, because you are, you know, like a archetypal.
Archetypal, yeah.
Yeah, if you can kind of explain that, because I had never heard that before. I mean, I understand and I know what a transformational and intuitive life coach is, or more or less how they work, just from doing the podcast and talking to some of them. But I've never heard that before. So if you can kind of explain that and give us a feel of you know, what that entails. and how you incorporate the coaching, like the life coaching, into your kinesiology practice. Because I
Yeah,
see how
absolutely.
closely it's intertwined.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the kinesiology for me is very much about the physical, mental, emotional symptoms. The coaching gets to it in a different way. And so
Okay.
I like the fact that I've got both abilities, because sometimes I'm doing the coaching and I'm like, we need to actually, get you on the table and do something a
Mm-hmm.
bit different here. Um, and I like the fact that I've got all those. But archetypal coaching, so the archetypes are the pinnacle of our behavior. So if you think
Mm-hmm.
about the arch at the top, it's that pinnacle. It is that ideal state of being.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned the archetypal life coaching through Evolve Now with Pip McKay here in Australia. I've just been blessed actually to do in person, because we did it all online. So at the beginning of this year, I got to do it in person with all of the beautiful people that I'd been studying with. So it was amazing. But it's really looking at basically the 22 archetypes,
Oh,
which,
okay.
yeah, it's looking at the way that we express them, the way that
Mm-hmm.
we are able to embody them,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that we can actually work with them. So it's quite a complicated, very deep. I mean, she did a 22-year priestess apprenticeship and all of this sort of
Jeez.
stuff. It's phenomenal,
Mm-hmm.
alongside working and things. But so she has gone really deep into the symbology, really deep, and it's the ancient archetypes. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not the Jungian archetypes. The Jungian archetypes are kind of here, and the priestess ones sort of sit above that.
Okay.
But they're basically more or less, it's the major arcana in the tarot. That's how they passed on a lot of the messaging. And there's a lot of artwork that passes on
Mm-hmm.
the messaging of the archetypes as well. And the way that Pip put all that together is just phenomenal. And so it's really looking at the way that we can express those archetypes in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and working with people to, clear their denied selves, their shadowed selves,
Mm-hmm.
be able to express them in the light. So a lot of archetypes, we will either do too much
Mm-hmm.
or we won't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
So they're either in what we call shadow when we're doing them too much, or they're in
Mm-hmm.
void where we're not doing them at all. And we want to get them into the light. And so it's working with those sorts of things. And it is such deep, profound work, really based on very ancient philosophy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is so
Yeah.
amazing. And once you know your passion and purpose archetypes, so you
Uh-huh.
have 4 of the first 8, which are
Mm-hmm.
what you call your passion and purpose. It's your genius flow. And when you're sitting in that, it is how you do everything well in the
Mm-hmm.
world,
Mm-hmm.
everything that you love doing. And so my genius flow basically is either nurturing myself or others.
Mm-hmm.
That is the idea of why I start. Why I do anything in the world is to nurture myself or nurture others. I then tap in and receive the wisdom
Mm-hmm.
from the hidden realms.
Mm-hmm.
I then work out what knowledge, what other things I need to bring in to create that, and then I take it out into the world. So they're my 4 steps for everything that I do well.
And I'm just curious about one thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm
Yeah.
not curious about one thing. I'm curious about quite a few things, but that goes back actually to the subtitle of your book,
Yes.
where it says, hang on a second, and I now can read my own writing. The title is Divine, Messy, Human, and the subtitle is A Spiritual Guide to Prioritizing Internal Truths
Yeah.
versus external influences. So
Yes.
is that basically what you're describing right now, is to find those internal truths
Yep.
rather than listening to the lies that you might
Yeah.
be told from external sources?
Yeah. If you think about, like I knew for years that I needed to leave my marriage. I just didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the courage to do it. But I knew, I had a deep inner knowing that I would need to leave one day. It was deep. And I was almost, it's like you go out and you survey monkey and you're asking people, is this normal? Is this right? What am I missing here? Because in some ways you want someone to go, you need to make this decision. Or if you hate your job, that's another one. When you're stuck in a job that you really don't like and you bitch and moan about, what's going on, because you want someone to go, you need to leave. Here's your resignation letter, go do it. We want somebody else to make those decisions for us. But realistically, we have to make our own decisions. And what we do is we actually distrust that inner knowing that tells us you need to do this. Because we're taught not to trust that inner knowing. Think of a tiny thing, especially coming from I guess, or being baby boomers, coming from baby boomers. It's that finish everything that's on your plate, because of course food was scarce. Now a child's going, I'm not hungry, just another couple of mouthfuls. We're being taught to distrust our inner feelings. Our inner, and in that case, obviously it's hunger. But how many times are we given similar things? We fall over, we cry, we're hurt. Just get up, get over it. There's no blood, you're fine. Well, I'm not fine. I've hurt my knee. But, there's no empathy, there's no compassion. It's just a get up, dust yourself off, move on. We're taught to distrust that. We're also taught to distrust our emotions. If we're angry as a child, don't you dare show that behavior. If we don't fall into that little narrow band of being a good girl, if we show anger, that's not what good girls do. You're not allowed to show anger. You don't fight with them. There's all of these ways that we are taught that our internal truth is wrong. And by the way, everybody else knows better. And even, going back to our original discussion about the church, it's a similar kind of thing. Do as I say, not as I do.
And I think especially as women, we are encouraged to eliminate that part of our intuition, our understanding. I mean, perfect examples of when we're little kids, or even, my mother saying, oh, Cheryl, that she's really very nice and she's so pious and holy. And then I find out years later when I'm an adult, she really was a crazy, what. And it's like, well, you could have told me that as a little girl, but of course I understand why you didn't. But then even as we're getting into our dating years, it's like, oh, come on, go out with that guy. He's cute. Well, I think he's creepy. Oh, no, you just need to be nice. Don't be so picky. Don't be so judgmental. Give him a chance, and you're feeling boundary issues, but you don't even know what boundaries are back then.
Yeah.
And
when you don't have people demonstrating good boundaries or teaching you good boundaries, then how are you going to learn them?
And it's almost like they're actually dismantling the boundaries that you intuitively might have and want to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, 100%.
We could talk about that for the rest of the, until it's 6 o'clock
night. Such
a
huge part. I know. And it's such a huge part of it. It really is. It is phenomenal. And that's what I love to do, is tune people back into that. We know our yeses and we know our nos. And what often we're doing is denying our yeses because we're taught to mistrust them. And some of the stuff even leaving my marriage, people are like, you're going to regret that. You're going to want him back in 6 months and he won't want you. And I'm like, I'm not going to regret this. I'm really not going to regret this. I've been thinking about this for years in one way or another, because things were that bad. Yet, and so I would have people saying that kind of stuff. I got told, you will never be loved the way he loves you, and it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. I don't know, I get gobsmacked. I sort of look at it and if somebody came to me and said I need to leave him, would be like, how bad is it? Do you need help packing your bags, or do you think there's room to save this? Your choice. I'm here for either.
But it's another one of those situations where everybody else knows what's best for you better than yourself. Exactly. We had this conversation just like 2 or 3 hours ago. I was doing another episode with somebody else in someone else's show, and he was explaining something to me about how, everybody was telling him he shouldn't run because it was bad for his knees. He should go biking. He should try swimming. He should just, sit down and rest. And I said to him, isn't it amazing how everybody else knows what you should do, not,
Yeah.
hey, how about trying what you could do? It's
Yeah.
even turning the language around a little bit, but it's so funny that
Yeah.
everybody is an expert. And I went through this, I'm sure you have, so many times in my life where everybody else was the expert of my life
Yeah.
and trying to
Oh,
tell me
100%.
what to do. And, boy,
Yeah.
and I was always so grateful that they did, because there's nothing like somebody telling me what I should do to light a fire under me to do the exact opposite.
And that's something I've only really learned these last number of years is starting to, I'll take what they say with a grain of salt because I'm like,
Mhm.
actually, you don't have the full context. You
Mhm.
don't have all the nuances that are going on within me. So you can't, and you
Mhm.
can't feel this,
Mhm.
you know. Even, a couple of months ago, I was going, do I close my business down or do I keep going? And every time I thought
Right.
that, I kept, somebody new would come in or something else would happen. And I'm like, oh, because it was an expensive hobby for a while there. I'm
Mhm.
not going to lie. Let's face it. COVID
Mhm.
decimated most people's businesses. I'm lucky to still be standing. But it's
Exactly.
that, and I know I'm damn good at what I do. So I know it's not about me.
Mhm.
And so there's that thing of, I kept getting those little nudges towards the universe and towards the
Mhm.
universe. And okay, I'm just going to keep going. Just another month, just another month, just another month. Um, and I knew at some point that other month would have to stop. And of course it hasn't. So I'm like,
Right.
okay, we'll keep going then, you know.
Okay.
But it is fascinating. It really is fascinating.
Well, let's talk about another expensive hobby, writing a book.
Yeah.
Because that was pretty
Oh,
expensive,
yeah.
and very time consuming, and it's really not as
Yeah.
lucrative as some people think that it might be.
No.
So yeah, tell us about your book, a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so it's actually really funny. I I was working with a coach on something completely different, and at one, I think we got me into a daily writing habit, and
Mm,
then one of our sessions, he went, "It's time. You're going to write your book, and it's going to." And this was the middle of October. He said, "You will have your manuscript in your hands by December." I went, no way, you're joking. You can't, that's only 10 weeks away. I can't do that. And I was like, no, no, not going to happen. But, I'll start and we'll see where I get to. I had fully written my manuscript by the 23rd of November, 5 weeks. Because once he gave me that, you've got to do it, it was like we created the container and all of the words, because it had been in my head for so long in one form or another. It had so many different titles. I have so many
mm,
book layouts of what it was going to
mhm,
be.
mhm,
And then I just started writing. I'd write a bit here and I'd write a bit there, and then I'd finish this bit and then I'd go on to this bit. And so I was writing it in lots of little
mhm,
chunks. And then I remember handing it to my editor at it was end of November, and then it was on a Tuesday. My body woke me up at 4:30 in the morning on that Tuesday, and I didn't have any clients that day. And it's like, right. And I got out 12,500 words that day. Like it
oh
was
my
insane.
God.
And I basically finished it. I handed it to my editor about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was exhausted, but my body was just, you're getting this out and you're getting it done. And I'm like, whoa, and I just sat there and I wrote. And then on the Thursday, I was like, oh my God, I forgot this. So anyway, I gave her about another 4,500 words. And then on the Monday, I handed her some other little bits that I'd kind of been working on around the book, but she said, give me everything. So I handed her that, and that was about another 1,500 words. I said, I promise I'm done now. Everything else can be in the next book.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then we started on with the editing process and things like that. We didn't get a lot done through December, so most of the
Mhm.
editing was done in January,
Mhm.
and typesetting and all of that kind of stuff. And I launched it on the 22nd of Feb 22. Two, two, two,
Jeez. Well,
two, two.
congratulations on that. I mean,
Thank you. So
it's
it was a
it's a big
effort.
deal. It's a
It
big, big
was.
deal. My goodness,
But
that's
the
ugh.
thing the thing with it is it's the stuff that I live, breathe, eat,
Mhm.
sleep. I do this
Mhm.
every day. I live it. And so there's not actually, it was interesting. One of the ladies who read it said, there's not a lot of your story in there. And I'm like, it's not meant to be my story. There's a few little bits in there, of
Mm-hmm.
course. But a lot of it is what I do in clinic. It is
Mm-hmm.
understanding ourselves. It is some of the esoteric stuff that I work with. I talk about paradoxes. I talk about our language in healing. I talk about, bringing in more questions. I talk about our
Mm-hmm.
negative thought patterns, and how we can turn them around. I talk about our masculine and feminine balance.
Mm-hmm.
Again, obviously archetypally, not in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, gender or identity. So there's a lot of that in there as well. I talk a lot about boundaries, and self-love and emotional fluency, and all of the stuff that I literally do
Mm-hmm.
every day, the stuff that got me from hating myself
Mm-hmm.
and being my biggest abuser, because nobody can abuse you more than you abuse yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that took me a long time to realize, and it took me even longer to accept that I was my own biggest abuser. My internal chatter thought I deserved nothing better. And in fact, a lot of the time it thought I deserved worse.
Oh.
And moving from that to a place where I can truly say that I love myself, that I feel abundant, that I look
Mm-hmm.
at my life, and my life is amazing. I have an incredibly supportive partner. My 2 children are flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
I walk the dog every morning. Like usually, I'm on the beach for nearly 2 hours every morning walking the dog.
Oh, I'm
Um,
jealous.
I usually start about 6 a.m. and I'm finished, about 20 to 8 roughly. And I'm watching the sunrise every day over
Mm-hmm.
the beach, rain, hail, shine. It's I have a beautiful life.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I could be living a life like this, where I want to come home and spend time with my partner, where I
Mm-hmm.
want to be around, my children, around my home, around all of that. I have incredibly supportive friends now who, although basically everybody who was in my life pre-divorce left. And so I was starting again. And all of the friends who have come in, oh my goodness, they are loving and supportive, and they cheer me on, and they want to see me do well. It's
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. And these are the steps it took to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I find so valuable.
That self-loathing is
Mm.
so deep and so
Yeah.
destructive and so
Oh, it is.
hard to overcome.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of self-reflection. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of honesty with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are a bit scared of it because they think it's like opening a Pandora's box, that once they open it, they're not going to be able to get that damn lid back on it. But the beauty of working with trained professionals to do it, and trust me, I've worked with a lot of professionals over the years. I've worked with psychology, I've done both sides of it as well. I've done, the more esoteric spiritual side. I've done the more practical side. I've done the, socially acceptable psychology type side. But all of them have helped me to open up that box, look at what's in it,
Mm-hmm.
work out what I want to do with it, which for the most part is accepting that it's there and learning
Mm-hmm.
to love it, because at some point it had a gift for me.
Mm-hmm.
And diving into that kind of shadow work in a safe way with people that I trust has been amazing. Now, I haven't always picked the right people to do it with, and then, as we all do, but I've always found the right people then to help me heal from those other things. And it's been a phenomenal journey, because it's allowed me to really understand that I can cope with anything that comes my
Mm-hmm.
way. It might be shit for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And having that innate sense of safety within me, the innate sense of joy within me, even when things are crappy and even when things are tumultuous, I still have this kernel of joy and this kernel of safety
Mm-hmm.
that I trust. And that has been the best thing. I don't have that negative self-talk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not there. Occasionally, obviously, I might be like, oh, that was a bit stupid. But it's about the action. It's not about me.
Right.
Whereas it used to be, God, you're so stupid. What the fuck are you thinking? You know, all of those things. And that's just not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think we learn so much more, and we're able to grow through that.
I have a question for you. And it might come out kind of crazy, but
That's all right.
how much do you think that humor helped you through this journey? Because you have a remarkable sense of humor, and you were laughing about things that really, most people would think, well, that really wasn't that funny. But I know myself that, my sense of humor is a little quirky and probably inappropriate at times,
Yeah.
but it really helped me through a lot of really tough times. So if you could just
Oh,
touch on that.
it is vital. Do you know, I still, some of the funniest things are happening when I am doing the deepest clearings with clients, when they are feeling like they are falling to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I will get, so I believe I've got a spirit team that I work with. I know I've got a spirit team that I work with. I shouldn't even say I believe it. I know that I do. And I know that other people's spirit teams work with me as well when I'm working with clients.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very well connected in that area. And I bring through whatever the messages are. Now, sometimes the images that I get are hilarious. I remember, seeing unresourceful people as
Mm-hmm.
my son in his little collared shirt with his dungarees getting his little Fisher Price plastic toolkit to help me fix big adult problems.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember seeing people who were close to me in my life actually in that outfit. There was this particular outfit and I would visualize them in that outfit going and getting their Fisher Price toolkit to go and deal with these big adult problems. And it brings in humor because it's like, oh, they're just being unresourceful. They're just going into that part of the brain that is programmed,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't access their big adult tools right now. They can't
Mm-hmm.
access that part of them. It helps us get through some of those really challenging parts. And I think laughter, we know how high vibration laughter is.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there is so much expansion and grace in laughter,
Mm-hmm.
and it lightens the mood.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to do when we are going into the dark is know that we can balance it with the light.
Mm-hmm.
And, my partner is often like, oh God, he's like, I don't know where all this comes from with you. Because he's just, we're having a serious conversation and I'll put in a comment and next thing we're both in hysterics. And I'm like, I don't know where it comes from either. Like, it's just, it is so vital to have that sense of humor. And for a long time, I lost mine.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time before that, I was chastised for it. I was teased for it. It wasn't understood. And so I became ashamed of it. I remember back in school, I used to laugh very easily, very loudly, and I was unashamed of it. And then they started calling me hoarse because I laughed so loudly and so effortlessly and easily. And so, of course, what did I do? I started silencing my laughter. And I'm like, what a stupid thing. Maybe they were just miserable and they needed a bit more
Mm-hmm.
laughter. And what they're doing is projecting onto me
Mm-hmm.
their crap of not being able to actually laugh as effortlessly and easily. And so bringing that humor back in has just lit up different parts. And I think it's so, so important. And I think it is interesting when I see a lot of the people who have done more work, they do tend to have good senses of humor
Mm-hmm.
because they can see the absurdity in life. Life
Mm-hmm.
is crazily absurd.
Yes, it is.
And the more we look at the absurdity and find the absurdity in it, the easier it actually becomes, because we realize it's just this big game that we're playing. And
Mm-hmm.
what we do is we play to the rules that we think they are, rather than going, is that something I actually have to do? Or is that something that I'm choosing to do? Or is that something I actually don't want to do? Like, we don't stop and question. We just play the rules that we've been given.
Mm-hmm.
And yet often there's so many other options. And the absurd comes often when we realize that all of that stuff that we're living to is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brilliant. And I look at the Dalai Lama when he's laughing and I'm like, hell yeah, man. He laughs about farts and all sorts of stuff. And, It's one of the funniest videos watching him laughing about farting.
Oh, that's
And you're
hilarious.
like, and he's the Dalai Lama. Like, it's brilliant. And
Mhm.
that's, yeah, I just think it's so magical.
Well, I
Yeah.
think you're magical, quite honestly.
Thank you.
Where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? How can they learn more about you? Give us the links to your website, social media, anything, anything, anything. Of course, it will be in the show notes, but I really like
Yeah.
for the guests to be able to.
Yeah. I'm trying to be everywhere and not doing any of them particularly consistently. So
Oh,
I'm all over the place. So my website is www.amandakate.com.au. My book is obviously on there as well. I think you can get the Kindle version on Amazon, definitely.
mhm.
I think you can also get the print version now on Amazon and from Barnes and Noble and
Okay.
from Booktopia here in Australia. There's a few other places that distribute it. I'm on Facebook at Amanda Kate Transformation. Instagram is Amanda__Kate because there's a lot of Amanda Kates apparently. And I didn't change my name until all the other ones are gone.
Oh,
I'm on TikTok at Divinely Messy. I'm on LinkedIn at Amanda-Kate. So I'm kind of all over the place and sporadically on each one.
mhm. Yes, I think I did see a TikTok video, which makes me very happy because TikTok to me is like, okay, we're not doing this. I mean, again, baby boomer, I'm so over all of the technology,
Yeah,
and I'm like you. It's like, hey, let's do all of these and let's just be sporadic. And but it's
yeah.
working out. So, but
And I've got a YouTube. I do some YouTube
oh,
stuff.
okay, good.
Yeah, all of the things. But
Mhm,
like I
all the
say,
things.
and I write on Medium as well. So yeah, I'm just sort of little bits in each area and seeing where people find me, basically.
Okay. And it has been a fantastic conversation. I have loved having you
Oh,
on the show. I love listening to you and talking to you. And just before we wrap up, do you have like
yes.
one? You've already given us so many wonderful tips, but one little pearl of wisdom that you can leave the audience with. And I think especially pertaining to that awful practice of people pleasing and self-flagellation, which again
Mm.
then leads to the self-loathing. So if there's somebody listening who's like, gosh, I want a little bit less self-flagellation in my life, how can I get it? Anything you can help them
The
get
best thing
started.
or the way that I started was just noticing my self talk.
Hmm.
And every time it was, God, you're an idiot. Why the hell did you do that? Any of those negative things, I'd go, okay, wait, whoa. And the question we ask in kinesiology, is it 100% true? If it's not
Mm.
100% yes, 100% true, then there is an element of doubt in it. So it has to be 100% true for it to be true. So if you're saying I'm an idiot, well, you got up this morning, you can tie your shoelaces. There are things that you can do that idiots, by definition, cannot do because they
Hmm.
don't have the capacity to do it. So already you're wrong.
Hmm.
So what is true? What can I say that's true about me? I did a stupid thing. Well, who doesn't really?
Hmm.
I mean, goodness gracious, everybody does. And so it's really about reframing. Because when you say I'm stupid or I'm fat or I'm ugly or whatever it is, it's putting that whole 100% of you in the eye,
Hmm.
and there's no room for anything else.
Hmm.
And the more we do that, the more we actually cast spells in our life. So we are looking for more of the same. If we keep saying I'm stupid, we are looking for experiences that prove to us that we're stupid. And guess what we find? Things that prove to us that we're stupid. If we change that self talk, we actually are retraining ourselves to look for things that prove it's not true.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember once I spilled a cup of milk on the bench and I went, God, you're a dickhead. And then I started laughing because I'm like, oh my God, it's been forever since I've said that to myself. This self-talk stuff really works because it must have been a good 18 months since I'd said that kind of
Hmm.
thing. And I think part of the reason it came up was to make me actually realize how long it had been since I'd done it.
Hmm.
Now, well, was it true? Like, no, that was actually really false. All I did was spill a glass of milk, so I wasn't paying attention. I was probably trying to rush because I had kids to pick up or whatever. That was all the truth was of it. So why am I making all of me into this, horrible creature for doing something where I was going too fast, not paying attention, not fully present, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so by staying present and recognizing that self-talk, we can start to change it. For it to be true, it has to be 100% true. Or we need to be able to own that that is true enough for us that we want to own it as part of us.
Excellent advice. Thank you for that. And
Absolute pleasure.
thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you. And it's been an honor, really.
Oh, thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful being with you. I love your energy. It's just, amazing. Keep doing your work in the world. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And everybody, thank you for listening. We both appreciate you. And do connect with Amanda and check out her website, check out her social media. She really does have a really cute TikTok. I saw 2 of her videos and they really are adorable. And she obviously has a lot to say and a lot to, if you're having any problems, you might want to check her out.
Yeah.
And, she can help you get rid of some of the nasty stuff and that self-flagellation. That's going to be in my head for the rest of the day. Thank you so much for listening. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.